Yes, again, it's a very much thank you to Kais for bringing us over. It's been said, it can't be said enough. I want to talk about substantive duties for agentic AI systems. So one way to think about this is we want users of AI systems to have individual rights, but those rights have correlative duties to the AI provider. So I'm going to focus on the duties, how to select those duties, how to standardize them, how their enforcement might work. I'm using a focus on United States law, of course. We could discuss the Korean corollaries. And I want to talk about agentic AI. We've talked about large language models, which have many applications as a core technology. But the frontier of AI systems now, and you say, is agentic. So these are systems that adapt to new experiences. They have complex goals. They work in a complex environment. They have some autonomy. They're not as supervised as other systems. And they can operate external tools, which introduces many security and privacy issues on top of other things. These agentic AI systems are popularized because of large language models, which are often used as the reasoning component in a multi-step process, but they can also use other systems for the reasoning component. And the ambition of these systems is much greater. It's to, perform labor in an enterprise context, to perform complex travel planning for consumers, and perhaps to replace certain kinds of professional services, yes, even lawyers. So what about fiduciaries? Fiduciary duty is a legal obligation for an agent to act in the best interests of the principal. And there are many professional roles that have these duties. And they tend to be the roles that are actually trusted in society. If you think about which experts you actually do trust, often it's because they are legally made to be trusted. So they are, to some extent, effective. And there's a couple of rationales for these duties in the law. One that's more qualitative is it's just about the asymmetry of knowledge and power. Some people are vulnerable with what they must entrust to their agents. And so the fiduciary relationship implies these duties to correct this vulnerability. There's also a more law and economics view. You say, listen, nobody can negotiate these contracts with their expert agents that have more knowledge and power. There's no way to monitor a contract with your doctor who knows so much more about medicine than you. So the courts must fill in the gaps here. Otherwise, the transaction costs will create a market inefficiency. So there are related issues here, agency law, different statutory duties, but I'll use fiduciary duties here to refer to these things because it's a particularly strong standard. And already there's this ambiguity. We're talking about agentic AI systems that sort of can act independently, can learn. And we're talking about legal agents, principal-agent relationships. These are not the same terms, even though they are the same word. And they're confused to some extent when we talk about AI agents. And we might expect them to act like an agent in a legal sense, even though they don't. They perhaps act in a technical sense. How do you bridge the gap here? So, in earlier iterations before agentic AI systems, there have been some legal arguments saying that listen, some big tech platforms, consumer services, are already like these fiduciary roles. Maybe because we entrust so much into these large intelligent big data systems, they ought to be fiduciary. Since Jack Balkin's argument, it's not a very successful argument in law or courts, but it's a provocative. Right? And there have been other variations of it to compensate for what some people think is very weak consumer protection in the U.S. system. So in some legislation that's come before the Senate and the House, they've introduced language of data loyalty, duties of loyalty for data protection, things like this. Nothing has ever passed into law in these cases, but it's a precedent for thinking about AI loyalty, where perhaps there's a stronger case to be made. There's some nuances here. There's a question of, is the fiduciary agent supposed to be obedient, do what you tell it to do, or is it supposed to act in your best interest? And you can imagine that there are cases where there's a conflict. The principal might ask the agent to do something that's not in the best interest. What should the agent do? So already there's a question of the design of these systems. And in practice, you know, if you had a trusted advisor and you asked it to do something stupid, you might want the advisor to convince you otherwise. So you're talking about the user interface of these AI systems and how it might be dynamic or conversational and guide the user towards understanding what their best interest is, and thereby sort of solve this problem of informed consent in the process of the relationship. So we can think a little bit more dynamically about this question of informed consent or best interest when we think past the sort of checkbox of a terms of service or privacy policy. One interesting way that fiduciary duties are structured in U.S. law is you have general duties of loyalty and care, and also subsidiary duties separated by context. So safeguarding a client's confidence is important for legal representation. This is a version of a duty of care. A different duty for corporate managers would be better monitoring and compliance. So we have specific duties for specific roles and contexts. In the AI discourse, we're often talking about artificial general intelligence, and we want AI agents that we can talk to about anything. Right? So there's a bit of a contradiction between the specificity of context for particular duties and the generality of the claims that AI providers make. And it raises a serious technical question that people at Google Research and in academia are working on. Just how would a AI system, when you talk to it, know what context you're asking it to work in? And how does it signal back that to you what context it assumes it is working as it operates? Because if it's operating external tools, you might want it to act, as a financial representative in one case, and as your lawyer in another. These would be different. So there are many use cases that are covered notionally by fiduciary duties, and there are some AI uses that fall within those use cases, potential use cases for AI, and those themselves give us a reason to ask this question. We want to know whether an AI can perform these duties, and if so, how? And if not, why? And once we know those questions, it opens the possibility to say, well, there's other scenarios, other use cases we might introduce these fiduciary duties by statute. If we say wanted to strengthen consumer protection or something else. Okay. But in order to do that, we need to know it's technically feasible or technically infeasible. Who would want to have clarity on this? This is, I'd argue, this is economically valuable legal and technical research because many people have an interest in this. So AI principals, AI users want good and efficient rules here because there's a market failure if they can't trust the providers. So it's creating value in an otherwise failed market to have good, efficient rules about ensuring this kind of quality. Right? Meanwhile, the incumbents, maybe not AI users, and also the early AI movers want more difficult requirements. They want to prevent further market entry. So you human lawyers, it would be great for you if it was actually impossible to meet the standard necessary to achieve the quality of service that you can provide. You want to raise that standard. Okay? And the first company that achieves that standard doesn't want anybody else to do it either. So they want that to also be different. Right? So there's a reason to make this clear, right? And also anybody that wants to move into this field as an AI system provider would like clear criteria. If it's uncertain, if it depends on the courts, they're going to be hesitant, they're going to have risk getting sued, yada yada. If we say, oh, here's clearly what you need to do to enter this market, then that makes it easier for the engineers to try to solve it. And we might think this is good for progress or innovation. So this is a valuable question to answer. I don't have the answers. This is an ongoing research agenda, which I invite you to participate in and talk to me about. So a few other dimensions of this problem. Who are the principals? You know, and in the most basic cases of a fiduciary duty, you have one principal, you have one agent, a patient and a doctor, a client and a lawyer, a shareholder and a corporate director. But even then, you start to get more complex. You have many shareholders to the same corporate directors. You could have many people that are beneficiaries of a trust with some set of trustees. Right? And in technology markets, you know, platforms which dominate many of these technical services, they're two-sided markets. And they will have owners, and then there's advertisers, and there's users. To whom are the duties owed? Is there a hierarchy of loyalty? When is loyalty to one compromised loyalty to another? There's also a question of identifying who the agents are, especially because AI systems have very complex supply chains. You've got developers, providers, data owners. They might be different parties. So introducing fiduciary duties into this space, it implies a more complex network of relationships and managing those. Right. So I think that the complexity of the agentic AI supply chains in practice is a big challenge. Science fiction has done us a disservice by telling us that the AI systems are like data from Star Trek. They're fully autonomous. They just need to be plugged in. They walk around. There's no question. They're a singular unit, one legal person, right? Real AI systems are technically complex and also organizationally complex. Whether it's the application layer, the models, the cloud computing platforms, sometimes they can be vertically integrated, but they can also be many different legal persons interacting with their own legal relationships, which introduces a great deal of complexity as to sort of assigning liability, figuring out who's responsible for achieving the requirements that you're looking for. So AI systems in practice, when deployed, they're relationally constituted by complex networks of legal as well as technical relationships. And your ideal fiduciary reasoning agent would have to understand the conflicts of interest of their users and also the very systems and companies that constitute them, that are them. So the more an AI system is able to automate reasoning about its own behavior, it has to understand its own legal context. So Florencia's research says they can't do that. They can't yet do this kind of legal reasoning. But if they were able to, they might be more trustworthy systems, better able to act in these agentic important roles. One of the consequences of the supply chain complexity is I'd suggest that most of these requirements are applied at the application level and then devolve down to the components like the model provider, etc. But it also could be that these are not just software artifact behavioral properties. So a benchmark data set for a model is a test of the software artifact of the model. But if you have, say, a broker-dealer, okay, has a fiduciary duties to the clients that execute trades with a broker-dealer, their fiduciary duties of best execution wind up being implemented with policy and procedure rules. They must keep track of why they make their decisions so that if they are audited, it's possible to do this. This is a institutional, organizational implementation of the duty rather than a technical one. So we might talk about software development processes, the architecture for training models, software engineering specifics, not just model artifacts itself as being what the law attaches to. Okay. And because this is quite complex, we have not standardized what these duties mean in practice. It's an open problem, but as I'd argue, an economically significant problem that people like us can solve. So I've got many questions and no answers. What duties should apply to these agentic AI systems? What duties currently apply? To which legal persons do they hold these duties? And to whom? How do you interpret the duties given the complexity of the supply chain, both technically and in terms of the legal relationships of what constitutes the AI? And what institutions are best for standardizing and interpreting these requirements? Like standards development organizations, regulatory agencies, should be done in courts. I ask you, please. That's my talk.
Inspiring presentation. I'll give you because I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm going to understand. Okay. For me, I wonder whether this question is a legal or ethical or technical questions. If those questions can be solved and it is technically feasible, I don't think there is any doubt on the fiduciary duty of the AI, because usually when we give an order to AI, we just put giving them the role. You're my lawyer, so I have this question, so can you answer to this question? Then maybe we can give them the fiduciary duty as lawyers. But of course, if it is possible technically, then, but if it is okay as technically, we can solve all this and why we have to consider these questions. But in other contexts, for example, self-driving automobiles, you find out a very sudden attack, and we have to deviate your handle. But this side, you can kill children. This side, you can kill an old person. Then what we have to choose, and then everything depends on the automatic, the self-driving car. In this case, maybe we have to think about how do we put in the program of the AI. But when we're using the AI, all the time we give them the answer as users, and we can give them some role to AI when they answer to. So my question is that whether there are any legally, if everything is possible technically, is there any legal question? Why it is legal? They have to study.
Are you saying you think that it's obvious the fiduciary applies in some cases?
Yeah, it seems like to be quite clear because you can give role and in the real world we do have such rule on fiduciary duty as a lawyer or whatever. So yeah.
So I think if you, I think I agree with you. I hope others do too, but there might be some who deny it. If you ask ChatGPT to give you legal or financial or medical advice, I think, at least last time I checked, it says, sorry, I can't give you legal, financial, or medical advice because they don't want to be sued. But if you say, pretend you're my lawyer and give me legal advice, it will. And people ask legal advice to these things all the time. So maybe there would be an argument that common law duties might apply to these cases. I don't think that's been tested in court. It will probably be defeated in court in the U.S. because they always have the best lawyers there. But I agree with you. But I think that if we were to hold them to this standard, then we have many technical questions to answer. And those technical questions, we should answer them well. Because if the answer is the technical standard is so high that we can't solve the problem, that's good. It protects the people, and it creates an engineering challenge, which is for the future. If the answer is, well, it's not so high, then that's good. It protects the people, and it allows a new market to flourish. So we should answer this question.